Please be seated. The court is back in session, and before I hand the floor to the assigned lawyers for a civil party, the Chamber will rule on the request by the defense team regarding documents placed on the interface. This morning, Keystone Pon's defense made a request on the certain documents placed in the interface by the co-prosecutors. The Chamber also noted that all parties received hard copies of the documents from the co-prosecutors. We also issued decisions on the use of the interface. That is document E319/7. And the Chamber would like to remind the parties to follow the procedures in that document E319/7. And in order to assist parties regarding the use of documents, we will provide you a list of the documents with the reference for the use in the trial proceedings in case 002/02. The Chamber also observed that the Defense Counsel Kong Som-on already received that copy. Because we noted that you signed the letter on the document 319/6.1. And now we'd like to again give the floor to the assigned counsels for civil parties to continue putting question to this civil party. And you are reminded, please slow down in your questioning, as when you speak too fast, it would not be proper for the interpretation to render it fully and effectively. You may now proceed. Counsel for Civil Party, good afternoon again, Mr. Civil Party. I'd like now to ask you questions regarding the situation of the children and the killing of those children at Knaptachan. Did you witness any killing of the children, and if so, how the killing was done? Answer. I witnessed one event when a child was killed. The parents had been killed before, and two children were brought in along 2 or 3 days after their parents had been killed. Those children, one of the children, maybe the younger sibling, age around 3 to 4 years old, and the eldest one was about 5 to 6 years old. But the younger one was taken first. At that time, I was climbing a palm juice tree in the afternoon, and from the top of the palm tree, I could see that the two children were taken away. And usually, while I was climbing the tree, they would wait for me to bring down the palm juice. And that day, I heard the sound of the children, and then I heard the sound of cracking the children against the palm tree. And when I looked down, I saw the children were smashed against the palm trees, and then the gallbladder were taken out from both the children and hanged there. There was a small pit to the south of the palm trees, and there were two of them waiting there. I didn't climb down yet. I was just sitting there at the top of the palm tree. In fact, there was a row of a palm tree, and I could move from one palm tree to the next. So first, as I said, they killed the younger one by smashing against the trunk of the palm tree, and then they brought in the elder sibling, and they used a hoe to hit the neck of the back of that child. And for older people, when they hit them with a hoe, they would use a saw to finish it. But in this case, they hit the child with a hoe and then drag him in through the pit. That's how I saw the event unfolded. Thank you. Besides that events that you witnessed, the killing of the two children and their gallbladders were taken out, did you ever witness or hear about the killings of other children? Answer, yes. I even know some of the killers, and some of them are still living today. Thank you, Mr. Sivapati, and thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to cede the floor to Martin Jakang to continue putting questions to this witness. President, thank you, and yes, you may proceed.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors. Good afternoon, co-prosecutors, dear colleagues, and everyone here present. And good afternoon, Mr. Sesai. At the beginning of your examination, you answered questions regarding your civil status, and my learned friend of the defense pointed out that you hadn't given the same name for your father before and at the time of the investigation. Can you explain to us why?
Yes, I can do that. When I first entered the courtroom, I was a bit anxious, and in fact, my father's name is Tet Soy, not Nang Soy. Nang Soy is his elder brother.
Il ressort des déclarations.
It transpires from the statements on record in which you confirmed that you were at Grand Kachan prison for 5 years. Can you confirm that to us?
Yes, I can describe about my experience there. I was rather young when I was detained there, and maybe I cannot recall everything. I believed my detention was due to my father being a district chief during the Sihanouk regime. I myself did not commit any wrongdoing, and at that time they would screen the background for capitalists and feudalists were their targets.
Est-ce que vous pouvez nous décrire?
Could you please describe to us the prison as it was, its surface area, and how it was fenced.
បាទ
In the prison compound, the building I'd like to describe varied in size. Sometimes the buildings had 5 meters wide and 12 to 20 meters long, and most of the buildings were ordered to be made by prisoners. And underneath the floor that we slept on, they laid barbed wire. And they would also use a small wood to support the walls. And also above the roof, they also laid barbed wires, but the roof were tiled and very neat in order to prevent any attempts to escape through the roof.
Est-ce qu'il y avait plusieurs clôtures?
Were there several fences around the camp?
There was a first layer of fence, which was closer to the current fence, and then there was a third fence to the east, and then a second fence to the east, and a third fence to the south. And the first one was rather thick, and it was laid with barbed wire.
Vous nous avez parlé
You have told us about the prisoners, explaining that they were chained inside the buildings. Can you also confirm that there were children and women in the buildings?
Yes, there were children and female prisoners. Younger children could not be shackled or cuffed, so they were allowed to lay next to their parents, because they did not have cuffs small enough to put around their ankle or wrist.
combien y avait-il en général de
In general terms, how many people died in each building on a daily basis?
It varied. People who died, let me say, for newcomers, they would be taken for interrogation at the interrogation place. And when they couldn't walk, then I was instructed to carry that prisoner into the building, and sometimes we had to carry them. They were tortured, and when they were brought into the building, they would be shackled and cuffed again, and they would be deprived of any rice or porridge. At that time, they were accused of betraying the country, so they would not be given food to eat during that time. As for male prisoners, they could be without food for 18 days. I noted that because for each day I would bend a piece of palm leaf, so I could count up to 18 when the person went without food and died.
Quelle était pour vous la première cause de mort?
According to you, what was the first cause of mortality in the camp?
they tortured those prisoners during interrogation. I didn't know how they were interrogated. At the interrogation place, they would tie them up, and they would be blindfolded. And if they didn't confess that, for example, they stole something from the cooperative, namely a coconut or a mango or a potato, and because those people starved, then they stole. If they didn't confess, they would be beaten until they confess.
Est-ce que vous avez...
Do you have any additional information regarding the means of torture used against the prisoners?
Those people who, for example, saw a piece of potato laid around would be they would take it, but for that reason they would be arrested.
Mais est-ce que des tortures spéciales
But were special torture methods used against the prisoners to compel them to confess?
They did, and as I stated, if prisoners were asked about what they did at the cooperatives, for example, did they destroy a hoe, did they steal a coconut, or did they blow a head of a toe? If they confessed, they would not be beaten and they would be taken back into the detention building.
Est-ce que parfois on mettait la tête des prisonniers dans des sacs en plastique?
Did they sometimes put the heads of the prisoners in plastic bags?
I didn't know the reason it was their plan at the interrogation place.
Qu'est-ce qui se passait si un prisonnier qui a été...
What happened if a prisoner who had been brought out tried to escape?
It would be a serious offense if a prisoner attempted to escape. They would not be beaten, they would be shot. For example, 2 or 3 soldiers would escort 5 prisoners to go and work, and if any of them attempted to flee, then they would be shot.
Quelle était la procédure?
What was the procedure? What did they do to get the people out of the buildings in the evening to have them executed? Mr. President, the Council is speaking too close to the microphone and there are cuts.
Mainly it was the deputy chief of the prison, President, to interrupt. Judge Vance, you may proceed.
We had a message from the translation booth. Counsel, you are speaking too close to the microphone. That results in cuts and in a translation which isn't complete.
Merci, Madame le juge.
Thank you, Your Honor. My question was, how were the people who are to be executed each day designated?
Before prisoners were taken to be killed, they put open the building's door and said that they would be allowed to return to the cooperative, but in order to follow the Angkar's plan, only some of them would be taken first. Then they would read the names from a list, and that they would remind them again to follow Angkar's plan and not to oppose the plan of Angkar. They would call out true names at a time, and those who were caught then would be unshackled and came outside the building, and then they would walk to the south of the prison where there was a potato plantation, and two soldiers were there to wait for them. They then would be requested to be blindfolded, and their hands were tied behind their back, and they said that the reason was for them not to take revenge against Angkar. Then they were taken to the killing site, and they would play music on a loudspeaker, and sometimes they would crack a firewood nearby in order to muffle the sound of the killing that they about to do. They would play the Khmer Rouge songs over the loudspeaker, and then after they did the killing, then they would return for more.
Est-ce que vous pouvez préciser?
Could you please specify exactly how the people were killed?
Prisoners were walking through the near the pit. Then they were ordered to kneel, and they would use a hoe to hit the back of their neck. And after that, they use about 40 to 50 centimeters long to slash their throat. Then they would be dropped into the pit, and then they would undress those people and pile them in a pile. And after they completed the day's killing, I would be ordered to collect the clothes and to bring them into a pond to the west of the prison. And there, because there was a warehouse there, and later on there will be a vehicle coming to transport those clothing through the cooperative.
S'ils n'étaient pas exécutés,
If they were not executed, for how long were the people able to survive under those conditions of detention?
Prisoners who were tortured and detained there could not stay longer than 1 month. They would be shackled all the time there.
est-ce que cela veut dire que de toute façon,
Does that mean that in any case they died within a month, even if they hadn't been executed before?
Yes. because before they were tortured during the interrogation and brought back into the building, they were in very bad shape already during those series of being tortured.
Est-ce que vous avez creusé des fosses pour mettre les morts?
Did you dig mass graves for burying the dead?
Yes, I did. I was not used yet for the so-called G of liberation. I did engage in the digging and burial of the dead bodies in 1977. At that time, there was a war going on near the Cambodia-Vietnamese border, and the activity of the killing there was very active at that time.
Est-ce que certains gardiens
Was the conduct of some of the guards unacceptable? That is, their conduct vis-à-vis women?
Yes. Some soldiers were kind and pitiful for prisoners, while others did not.
Est-ce que vous avez vu un ou plusieurs?
Did you see one or several guards rape women?
I saw one guard, and at that time he used me. He told me about that incident. One day at about 3 or 4, while I was taking the water buffalo back, there was a so-called dagger prisoner to the west part of the compound, that is underground prisoner. He told me to go to the south, and I asked him why he wanted me to go to the south. He told me that he just did it and that I should go and organize the place. When I went there, in fact, he had just raped 2 women from a mobile unit, and he used a bullet head to insert it into the vagina of the women. And I can tell you that that female prisoner is still alive today.
Est-ce que il y avait en général des relations sexuelles entre?
Generally speaking, were there sexual relations between the head of the camp and prisoners?
Yes, but I did not see it clearly. In fact, the prison chief was flirting with the female prisoners who were allowed to cook rice in the kitchen. In 1979, when the Vietnamese troops arrived, he fled and he took along a woman to be with him. And the woman is still alive, but that person or that man died.
Est-ce que il y avait dans la prison différents?
Were there different categories of prisoners in that camp?
As for the types of prisoners, whatever times you were in, the treatment toward them was the same. And the number of prisoners or the number of those who were killed varied from day to day, but the killing happened every day. And they were all in the same condition and situation. They were treated the same.
Est-ce que
Were some prisoners called the new people?
Response: yes. Most of the prisoners were the new people, called 17 April people. It was happened in 1975, but later in 1977, they were categorized the same, and anyone who committed any mistake was sent to Krang Tachan at the time when war was happening at the border.
Est-ce que vous-même
Did you yourself almost die or were almost killed?
Yes, one time I was beaten on my head with the rifle, but I was beaten with a whip many times when I picked some vegetable or cassava leaf, but the most severe beating happened when I stole cassava for food.
Est-ce que
Did you lose many members of your own family in this camp?
Response: I lost one father in that prison.
est-ce que vous avez vu
Did you see or did you only learn about the execution of your father?
Response: yes, I heard it from the soldier and the old people who told me, but the chief did not tell me about that. But other soldiers who were close to me told me about that.
Est-ce que
Did anyone wear the hat belonging to your father?
Response: the hat, sarong, and T-shirt, I took them for myself, but Cheng, the deputy chief, took a hat and he would wear it, and other people would wear it sometimes and wore the hat of my father.
quel était
How many people stood guard of the camp?
Response: there were 12 soldiers and other chiefs. There were 3 chiefs. Sometimes when there were more prisoners and other soldiers were sent in, so for ordinary day there were only 12 people or 15 people. They would send more staff and soldiers to the prison when the prisoners increase at that place.
Who carried out the interrogations?
Response: only the chief and the deputy chief, including Cheng An and Ping who did the interrogation.
Est-ce que
Do you know if it was Chief Ta An who selected the people who would be executed?
Response: I don't know about that because I was one of the prisoners, because they would kill prisoner every 2 or 3 days. Before the execution, he would call 2 of his messengers, and I was tendering cow next to the prison. And when I saw the messenger went to the district office, and they returned with an envelope. Sometime the next morning there will be a program, and Tanong was also killed there. And before his death, he was used to dig the pit.
que trouviez-vous dans le
What did you find buried beneath the soil when you were planting the coconut trees?
Response: the coconut were grown on the grave where body were buried, and the dead body of the prisoner who died of starvation, and they were buried in an individual grave, and the chief ordered me to grow coconut right on the grave, and also cassava at the same time.
à la libération
When the camp was liberated, how many skulls did you count?
Response: I did not participate in the counting. I joined in the excavation. At the beginning, there was no NGO organization advised us to do so, but the villagers were digging out, trying to find gold from the victims. But later, the skulls were counted, and there were more than 10,000 of skulls found. But I don't remember the exact number.
durant
Over the course of those years at the camp, did you see any important political figures visit the camp?
Response: I do not recall the year. I saw him visiting in one visit, 2 visits, or 3 visits. He would spend about 1 hour, and the staff told everyone to put the prisoner in circle, and only the cadre who would move around. And then for a while, those leaders would left by car. And during the last visit, I was bitten with a whip on my back.
pouvez-vous
Can you please specify the name or names of those leaders?
Response: I don't know very clearly, but I heard from the soldier. He asked me, do you know him? And he told me he was the Ta 15. That's what he told me.
following the liberation of the camp. Were you able to quickly forget?
Response. Talking about what happened at Krang Tachan, I try to forget even though I am at home. I do some small business, and sometimes the newspaper journalists came to interview, and then they list down my name, and they would come to my house. I don't want to give any interview because it reminds me of Krang Tachan. I don't want to hear, to see. I would like to close the story, but I could not avoid that.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saisen. I have concluded my questions for you.
The President, thank you, and the Chamber wishes to hand the floor to the co-prosecutor to ask, to put question to the civil party.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, good afternoon to you, to your honors. Good afternoon to all parties present. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Civil Party. I have a few questions to put to you this afternoon, as well as during tomorrow's morning session. I want to return in more detail to what you have already stated to my colleagues, to my learned colleagues from the civil parties. If you do not understand any one of my questions, please signal so. And I would ask that you limit yourself to describing to us what you saw or what you heard at Krang Tachan, and to also indicate if you have not fully heard or understood a question. I want to return to the period during which you were arrested and the way the arrest proceeded. I gathered from this morning that when you were arrested, you talked about trapping commune, but I'm not sure if we fully grasped the name of the commune. Can you please just repeat and tell us again where you were taken at the point of arrest prior to your arrival at Krang Tachan?
Response. I was taken away from my house from Tropang Lien village, and I was sent to Ang Roka office where the youth unit stay. It was the office of Takon prison, and then I was sent to Tropang Pring. It was called Takel prison, and later that night I was sent to Krang Tachan.
Angroka, est-ce que vous avez...
Ranka, did you see other prisoners who were arrested, such as yourself, the way you were arrested?
Response. I saw a line of prisoners were detained at Ang Roka prison. There were about 7 or 10 prisoners. I spent there only one night, and later that morning I was sent to Krang Tachan.
Comment avez-vous été...
How were you sent to Krang Tachan? Were you sent there by foot, or were you driven there?
Response. There was no vehicle or motorbike. I was tied up, and another prisoners were marched on foot. I was walking in front and another prisoner walking behind me, but we were tied up only in one string.
Est-ce qu'il y avait un garde?
Was there a security guard or several security guards or militia who accompanied you?
Response. When I arrived at the office at Ang Raka and Tropang Pring at Takal, there was soldier from Krang Tachan came and escorted us, and so the village militia who brought people to Krang Tachan, they could reach only the external fence. And when they arrived at that fence, that place, they rang the bell, and the staff from Krang Tachan would come and receive the prisoner from the external fence, and then those militiamen from the village or commune would return.
Merci.
Thank you. When you arrived at Krang Tachan, within the very center, within the inner compound, what happened? Were you identified? Were you photographed? What happened at that point?
Response. There was no photo taken. Any kind of prisoners were sent to the building and then locked up, and they left them there. They would call for interrogation 2 or 3 days after arrival.
Est-ce que vous savez si...
Do you know if, at the point of arrival at Krang Tachan, documents were given from the guards or militia who escorted you to the security guards at Krang Tachan?
Respond. No, I don't know about that. We were just escorted and sent to the place, but I don't know about that.
Est-ce que
After April 17, 1975, do you know if people were transferred from Ang Hokar to Krang Tachan?
Response. And I asked the fellow prisoners, where are you from? Some of them said they came from Ang Raka. Others said that he's from Ang Raka, Srai Andong, and other places.
est-ce qu'il y avait à Krang Tachan
At Krang Tachan, were there prisoners who came from the surrounding communes, or were there also prisoners who came from more remote communes located away from Krang Tachan?
Response. As far as I observe, when I remove urine or feces from the prisoner, I heard from them that some were sent from a remote area, not from Tram Kok district. I heard from the soldiers, they told me that the prison belonged to the zone.
Si je comprends bien,
If I understand your response correctly, you were telling us that Krang Tachan was a security center that was accountable to the district level. Is that correct?
Response. It belonged to District 105, but the prisoners were from Tani, Tukmir, Takao province, and Spoo, Kampong Spoo. And I heard from the soldier that the prison was operated by the zone.
Merci.
Thank you. Just now, or earlier, you described some places or buildings within the Krangtachan Security Center. I would like to ask you if the buildings that you described and the fences and the areas where the prisoners were detained and the interrogation areas, if any of those areas underwent renovation after April 17, 1975, or if the areas remained as is during the time that you were there.
Response. There was no change to those buildings, but there was something built in addition to that. Before 1975, there were only 2 buildings, and later they built other 2 buildings.
Quand vous faites référence
When you refer to those 2 buildings prior to 1975 and then the following 2 buildings that were built after 1975, am I to understand that they were buildings that housed prisoners, or did they serve other purposes?
Response. They were built for the prisoners because they built with barbed wire as the security for detention. I think it was for the prisoners.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to show the civil party a map. I would like to have this diagram shown on the screen. It was produced by the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges based on a description given by the civil party when he traveled to Krangtachan and identified the entrance, the security guard posts, the execution centers, or the execution sites. This is under D 125 stroke 220/37. It is one single page. I will therefore not cite the ERNs. With your authorization, I would like to hand this document over to Mr. Civil Party and to have a copy of the map projected on the screen.
Alors, je vais vous lire ce qui est écrit au-dessus.
I'll read to you what is written on top and then describe the map. Diagram of Krangtachan based on the information provided by Mr. Seysen. There is no longer any remnant of the building. Now on this map, we see that there is a field that measures about 75 meters by 75 meters. Can you please specify if the map corresponds to the entire Krangtachan site or only a portion of the site?
Witness. This is the internal fence, the first fence we call. It is 70 meter by 90 meter. It used to be a large place, but after 1979, a villager claimed for some part of land, and so this is only the inside compound, but there are other places where the burial site outside the current location marked on this sketch.
D'accord. Alors,
Very well. And on this map, there seems to be two entrances, one to the west and one to the east of the center. And at each of these entrances, there is a security guard post. Of those who were arrested, which entrance did they go through?
ពីរហ្នឹងគឺអត់កំណត់ទេ
Respond. There is not specific for the entrance. There were more prisoners from the west gate, but no one was always on duty on the west gate. But when prisoners were brought in, they would ring the bell, and then the people inside came to receive them. And also happened the same at the east gate.
donc on voit sur le plan qu'il y a 4 postes.
Now there are 4 security posts based on this sketch. There is a western and eastern gate, and 2 near the center. Can you please tell us where the chief of Khang Tachan Ta'an, after April 17, 1975, where in this map was Ta'an's office located?
Response. The year when he went there to replace the first chief. The first chief was Tachain, and then Ta'an came in, I forget the year, but he came after the liberation of Phnom Penh by DK. But when there are a lot of tasks to do, and then I saw Tapi, Chain, and An, they need to do more work over there, especially after 1975. They came and spent time working there during the daytime, but other cadre would return to their place at night.
Est-ce que Ta'an
Did Ta'an have an office?
No, he did not. He usually was at near where I was detained. It was just opposite where I was detained.
vous avez mentionné
Several times before the co-investigating judges, you mentioned that there was a transcriber at Khan Tachan. Did that person have an office? Where within the compounds of the camp did the transcriber work?
អ្នកវាយអង់គ្លេសលេខ
The typist was also a soldier, but he was more knowledgeable and maybe a little bit more educated than others. Then the little Dutcher had him typed, and that's the small Dutch or Dutch Toch in Khmer. And the place where he used the typewriter is not far from where I was detained.
est-ce que vous avez eu accès
Did you have access to the place where the little group was typing documents in that center? As a prisoner, did you have access to that particular location since you were a prisoner who was allowed access to several places in the prison?
Yes, I could. I could go to where those people worked because I was also a cleaner there to go and clean and wipe his desk.
Pourriez-vous nous dire, puisque vous disiez que
Can you explain to us what you meant when you said that where you worked wasn't very far from where you were? When you got into Krang Tachan camp, in which of the buildings were you residing? Were you staying?
Initially, in 1974, there were only 2 buildings. I was detained in the West building for several months before I was moved to the East building. And later on, I was moved to another new building also at the East. And it was close to where he was.
est-ce que ce dernier bâtiment à l'est
And was that last building to the east where prisoners who had light sentences were held, or was it for prisoners with heavy sentences?
I was detained through the south part, and there was another one on the north part, but we were allowed to work. Usually, when they remove the military bar, then we would be released to go and work outside, and I would be the first one amongst the prisoners in that role.
Vous avez décrit 4 maisons de détention.
You described 4 detention buildings. Can you give us further details regarding the material used for building them? Because you said there were differences in the way buildings for prisoners with light sentences were built and the way buildings for prisoners with heavy sentences were built.
No, the buildings were built in a similar fashion, and light offense prisoners had to work. And if there was a plan from the upper echelon to execute them, they will be executed, regardless of they were light or serious offense prisoners, as in the case of Tamon. After he returned from working, the chain called him, and then he told me that he would go first. And after that, I would hear a sound. That is the sound of him being killed. So, regardless whether you are light or serious offense prisoners, you will be killed.
D'accord. Est-ce que vous savez...
Right. However, do you know how the Khmer Rouge or the cadres made the distinction between prisoners with light sentences and prisoners with serious sentences? What were the criteria they used to place the one or the other in one category or the other category?
No, I did not know about that.
Vous avez dit ce matin...
This morning, you stated that prior to the liberation, that is the 17th of April 1975, prisoners were brought in groups of 2, 3, or 5. After the liberation, a larger number of people were brought in, about 50 and more. Can you tell us whether in the months following the 17th of April 1975, there was a significant increase in the number of prisoners held at Krang Tachan?
The number of prisoners increased after the country was liberated. That is, after they liberated Phnom Penh, those former Lone soldiers were regarded as prisoners of war, and Phnom Penh people were considered 17 Abri people, and they were taken there. That was the time they accused those people of being implicated. As in my case, my father worked for the former regime, and I was implicated, and other people who be accused of being CIA spies. And majority of the 17 Abri people after the liberation were asked about the rank they held in the previous regime, and that's where they detained those people.
Comment saviez-vous qu'il s'agissait d'anciens militaires de...
How did you know that they were former Lone Nol soldiers or 17 April people? Was that something you were able to discuss with the prisoners themselves, or you came by such information by talking to the guards or the cadres at the camp?
It was both from the victims and from the soldiers. A few of those soldiers trusted me, and sometimes they chit-chatted with me and told me about that.
Quels étaient les soldats avec qui vous parliez le plus souvent?
Who were the soldiers with whom you spoke the most? That is, who provided you with information? I mean, people at Krang Tachan.
It was Sim, sometimes Little Dutch, Son or Sang. They were the one who told me, because they could use me whenever they wanted, and sometimes they left rice crash for me to eat.
D'accord.
Very well. A while ago, you said you moved from one detention facility to another. Did it happen that you were housed somewhere else as opposed to being housed in the detention center with other prisoners?
I was a prisoner, and I was moved to the East Building. The East Building housed those prisoners who were allowed to work inside the compound. And among those prisoners, I was the first person in a row. And that's because I also knew how to make shower palm juice for him. And I also helped him when he went to shoot at birds. And usually they would use a dynamo to produce enough light to go and shoot birds at night. And when they return, they would ask me to make a sour palm juice for them to drink.
Merci. Je vois...
Thank you. I see that the time is moving very fast. Perhaps this might be the time for our break, Mr. President.
President, the time is appropriate for a short break. We will take a break now and return at 3 p.m. And the Chamber would like to inform the co-prosecutors that you only have 30 more minutes when we return. And of course, it won't go through tomorrow morning session, as you stated while you were asking questions to this civil party.
Just one clarification, Mr. President. I haven't quite understood what you said. I believe that the civil parties and the prosecution have one day to put questions to the civil party and the defense also have 1 full day. I believe that after the break we would have only 4 hours. And after the break I have only 1 hour. That is why I would like to use up the whole of tomorrow morning.
President, maybe I am mistaken myself, and I think the civil party is going to give testimonies for 2 days. So 1 full day will be for the prosecution and the lead co-lawyers for civil party. And court officer, could you assist the civil party during the break? And also for the support staff from TPO, and have them returned to the courtroom at 3 p.m. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ